Take equal parts an abandoned musical about Peter Pan, Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run, and Phil Spector's Wall of Sound production style. Mix thoroughly and throw in an oven at 350 degrees. Take it out, and you have meatloaf. Bat out of hell. Stay with it. You like that, Jerry, huh?
Yes, I did.
Couldn't hold it till the end show. We will be right back. Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast, home of the rock and roll recipes.
You are nailing it in the new year, man.
Yeah,
or Jerry is
kicking it off right.
Unless Jerry is just that deep into the six pack that everything is funny.
No, I genuinely thought they were pretty good. This is my first one.
Yeah, I try and think when I write these intros. I try and pair it to some of the material we have and keep it funny. So I'm glad that one was a winner. That was a corker. Huh?
Yes.
And all of it's true. So this is gonna be a fun episode because this is another one of those albums that has just such a weird pedigree. And it's such a weird kind of a one-off too, a moment in time. But before we do that, Eric, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, sir.
Yeah, we're entering 2024. Wow.
Indeed.
The future when we were young,
Yeah,
4 years ago.
flying cars and
these
Star Trek meals
have appeared in a lot of like old sci-fi movies I've been watching, like the years like 2024, and it's like, whoa, we're here, so that's kind of crazy, but
still got the same bills as I did in 1995.
Yeah.
Only they're bigger.
Yeah. And we'll save that for another time. But so we're entering our soon to be our fourth year of this podcast. So if you're new to this podcast, if you're listening on one of your favorite podcast providers, go ahead and rate if you would. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribing to us would be great. This way you get a notification every time a new episode drops. And I've been dropping extra episodes on YouTube because we have a lot of episodes that we never posted online. So I'm trying to kind of drop some of those extra episodes. So if you like the video version, give us a like and a subscribe and maybe even a comment on the episode. We respond to the comments as well. So we would appreciate that. Or like I said, your favorite podcast provider, if it has a rating system, go ahead and give us a rating. That helps us continue to rise as we plan our world domination of podcasting in year 4. We're like Pinky in the Brain, right? I say to Eric, what are we going to do tomorrow, Brain? And Eric says everything the same thing we do every day, plan to take over the world.
Oh, man.
So, we've got two great guests with us here. Of course, Mr. Jerry Sullivan is with us. Welcome Jerry.
Back, sir.
Happy New Year.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
He's a utility player because he does music and movie episodes. He does both. He doesn't just say, I'm just going to do movies.
I got skills.
He is well-rounded. So, and I love when Jerry comes on. He's the point of view, and it's just always a great, fun conversation. Making his like third appearance in like 5 weeks or something. I don't know. This guy's like trying to take over. He's taking over. This seat might be empty one day and be like, hey, welcome aboard, Chris.
Hey, good to be back. Good to be back.
How are
you?
It's great to have you back.
Christopher Clark is with us once again, bringing to bear his encyclopedic knowledge of music as well. And we've got a lot of. Eric just sent me a list of stuff that he's looking at for the upcoming year, and we're like, Chris will probably do that. Chris,
Yeah.
I'm already trying to like slot people in. So. And he sent a fantastic list. We've got
it's a list of stuff that now that we have such great people on with us,
we can go into.
We're actually thinking of you guys now, so we're thinking of titles that you guys would be excited to talk about, and so we're that's
Jerry. Jerry, so Jerry will be happy to know that the complete series of Gumby, we will be doing an episode about that. We're going to do the whole Art Clokey universe.
I will stop sending you emails about it then.
You can stop sending me little pics of Gumby then. So, Chris, thanks a lot for being here, and of course, Jerry. So let's jump into this. We're talking about the album "Bat Out of Hell" from Meat Loaf, which is actually two separate words. It's not Meatloaf, it's Meat Loaf is the artist's name. This was released in October of 1977. All songs written, which is important, by Jim Steinman. He is kind of the mad scientist behind this whole Meatloaf. Most of the Meatloaf universe is kind of a Jim Steinman kind of creation. Produced by Todd Rundgren, oddly enough. Todd Rundgren is one of those auteurs. He plays all instruments himself. He's in a group called Utopia also at the time, known for his solo work, Hello, It's Me, and Bang on the Drum, and just an all-around kind of, who's always into new technology and always pushing the boundaries of recording and of what pop music can be. So they got him to produce it. There were 3 singles released stateside, 5 including the UK, but we'll just do it the 3. You Took the Words Right Out of My Mouth, hit number 39. 2 Out of 3 Ain't Bad, hit number 11. And Paradise by the Dashboard Light also hit number 39. This went to number 14 on the Billboard charts. It was a slow roll, wasn't an out-of-the-gate smash. It went 14 times platinum, though. So that's a heavy hitter, and 43.
It's pretty good.
43 million worldwide, Jerry. 43 million copies sold worldwide.
I have one of them.
And I've got the other from Caldor.
Oh, Caldor's was great.
That's crazy.
That is the fact that you just showed me that just made my day.
See that?
I love Caldor.
A single tear streams down Jerry's face as he remembers the rainbow logo of Caldor.
Yes.
Anyway, actually, oddly enough, this is the biggest selling album in Australia, I believe, if my research was correct. I don't know why, but this was the biggest selling. This holds the record of the biggest selling album in the country of Australia. So
it knocked out Saturday Night Fever. I mean, Saturday Night Fever was like at that point number 1 there.
Yeah.
And then they stopped buying records, apparently.
It's just amazing. This thing is like, it found its audience. It definitely found some.
It's like Hasselhoff in Germany.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So let's do a little brief history. I unpacked a lot in the opening statement. Actually, there's 3 things that really kind of come to play or come to bear on this album, and all of it comes from Jim Steinman, and he is actually listed on the very bottom of the LP, songs by Jim Steinman, and that was a requirement. He wanted his font to be a little bit bigger, and he wanted to actually be on top, and they're like, it's got to be like Meatloaf, it's got to be like a group, and then they put the songs by Jim Steinman. Because really, this is his brainchild, and it started with an abandoned futuristic play that Steinman was working on in the late '60s about Peter Pan called Neverland. And he had this play, and there were 3 songs that him and Meatloaf kind of targeted from that play that were usable in this project, which was Bat Out of Hell. Tell you right now, Bat Out of Hell.
It's the first 3, right? I think.
No, Heaven Can Wait and All Revved Up.
Yep.
Were the ones.
And I think All Revved Up had a different title in the play.
Yeah, had a different title, but about futuristic thing about adapted about Peter Pan, not squarely about Peter Pan, but this album was very difficult. That no one was interested in it. So Meatloaf and Jim Steinman were working on this as early as 1974, 1975 with the project, shopping things around, and rejection. The running joke became that companies are creating record labels just to reject the album. Like that was the running joke. It's like they couldn't get a look at this, or a look at the project. Finally, they start to record. They're like, okay, we're going to just start recording this thing, and they get Todd Rundgren. Todd Rundgren came on under the assumption, or he was told that RCA had signed a deal with them, and RCA was going to produce this album, and he was also on RCA. He starts the project, then finds out, well, there's no contract. They don't have anything.
Right.
So he's like, okay, well,
and he himself said, I think he took a good look at some of these songs, and they were like, to him, they were just really absurd, and but he wanted to do it, right? I think he was all over it because it was just so out there.
Yeah, and that's where the 2 parts of it come in. Is Todd Rundgren ends up starting to foot the bill. He gets in touch with somebody another music executive and said, "Listen, I'll help out, but we need money." And then Rundgren ends up footing the bill. And then to what Eric's point was, is Todd Rundgren at the beginning of this project thought that this was like a comedic spoof or a comedic take on Born to Run. He thought that this was kind of like, he goes, this feels like this is, you're kind of making Born to Run, but like as a comedic, in a comedic style. He really didn't think it was very serious. And it's very interesting because I just read an article about it recently. And now when I listen to the album, it has a whole different feel to me. Because Jim Steinman did admit later on, he goes, it wasn't, what do you say? It wasn't inspired by, but it was influenced by Born to Run.
Yeah.
Anybody want to chew on that one?
See, in my mind, like when I listened to it, like I didn't necessarily think that they were inspired by Springsteen or that I necessarily saw the Springsteen influence. But what I did see is that, to me, it was almost like Steinman and Springsteen were listening to the same things in their formative stages. So like the Phil Spector stuff, the early rock and roll, like all that's there. So I don't necessarily think it's derivative of Springsteen or like inspired by Springsteen necessarily, but has the same influences that a Springsteen record would have. Like that's how
exists alongside.
Right. Exactly. Like it's just that their formative stages were listening to the same music.
Yeah, that's a good point. I always thought, it never occurred to me. Springsteen never really occurred to me. Although there are certain things of the album that are, and of course, two of the members do play on it, and that's Max and Roy Batan on keyboards. So you have that sort of glockenspiel, in certain songs, like we talked about on Born to Run.
Like on Born to Run.
But it never occurred to me. Springsteen never came to mind. For me, it was more sort of like Rocky Horror, influence because of his stint in that movie. And, there was kind of going there, sort of like the theatrical sort of absurd, campy kind of thing, but now, now that people talk about it, I could definitely, I could hear it.
There's some threads there. It's not, it doesn't sound like Bruce Springsteen whatsoever, but when you mention, it's kind of like, oh, I can kind of map some of what was going on. Now, Jerry, when did you, were you on this when it first came out? I remember when this came out.
No, I did not. I grew up being into like heavy metal, like Iron Maiden, Metallica, all this stuff. And I remember seeing this album and thinking I should be into that. But I would see Meatloaf and I'd be like, that is so stupid. And I can remember I was working at, I don't know if you guys ever remember Central Bicycle Mart on Central Avenue. I used to work there. I was I worked in the basement repairing and stuff. And
in the basement.
And
how far he has fallen from where he was. In the basement again.
Yes. And full circle, I'm back in my basement. So, and we used to, the manager there was this guy, Ken Koza, and he used to always put, I guess it was 92.3 with Howard Stern on.
K-Rock.
And then it would, eventually go into rock and roll. And Paradise by the Dash, I can remember this vividly. Paradise by the Dashboard Light came on. First time I ever heard it and I was like, what the F is this? And I loved it. And then I went across the street to Tower Records and bought the album, and I put it on. And from those first notes of Bat Out of Hell, I was blown away. Like this as a whole album has become like one of my favorite albums ever because it's such a production.
Yeah.
Learning much later on about how it was, supposed to be like, a play, you can hear that. Like the Bat Out of Hell starts out, it's like an overture. And you can picture people running around the stage doing all this shit and stuff. And it was just like, and then the whole thing just like, that was what I would listen to it constantly. And I was always like, and then when I would see Meatloaf, I was just taken by the fact of the theatrics of what he would do on stage, like the whole thing. And I was actually, I didn't go for Bat Out of Hell 3, but Bat Out of Hell 2.
Yeah.
Is another one of my favorite because of him.
Yeah.
It's I would listen to it and I would picture him acting out the song, and that's why it has become one of my favorite albums because of the whole theatric, like everything, like the emotions that come through when some of these
Yeah.
things play, because it's like nothing I'd ever heard.
Yeah.
I heard, Iron Maiden. Yeah, they have really long songs, and a lot of them are, these long stories and stuff. But it was like an event listening to
Yeah.
Bat Out of Hell.
Yeah.
And it blew me away from Paradise, and then the first notes of Bat Out of Hell. That was it.
All right, so you brought up the album cover, so we're gonna go there because I have it written down. So this album cover must have pissed off so many metal bands in the '80s that they were probably like, "Fuck, the greatest album cover for metal has already been done, and it's not a metal group."
Yes,
right. That's the thing is this looks like something that your parents are going to be definitely afraid of you listening to. And
which
it's
is
not,
why I thought I should have had it. But then I saw Meatloaf, and I was like, that is stupid. Why would I buy anything called Meatloaf?
It doesn't connect.
No, it doesn't. It's so far removed from anything having to do with heavy metal, although there are some interesting, things that Rundgren does on guitar and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, the other who else I think had that kind of, like Molly Hatchet, I think, or
Molly Hatchet's
like that.
Like
that's not metal either. So it's so it is deceiving.
Yeah,
but
a lot of great
But
albums.
they do say that. Would you guys agree that this? It was said that this might have been a precursor to a lot of the sort of the hair bands of the '80s. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
except
sort of theatrics and
it's too long, but the theatrics and everything and the show of it, absolutely, I can see that connection.
Yeah, and there's a couple of other things you mentioned there too, which kind of goes towards Jim Steinman. As you said, it felt like a play, or felt like a play being presented. Obviously, it became a play much later on, but that I think is because of Steinman and Meatloaf, because both of them kind of had kind of Broadway a little bit of a Broadway pedigree, or being on the road and being in shows pedigree.
Yeah.
So Jim Steinman has the kind of those. Yeah, these are Broadway style lyrics, and then the way that Meatloaf delivers them. He's in that big. He delivers it not in a rock and roll singer style, but in someone that would be singing like a spotlight song in a musical. Like when he sings, like when almost all of these songs that he sings, he's singing in like that musical kind of timbre that he has with the vibrato that he has. So it takes on this grandiose, almost melodramatic.
Very projected.
Feel to it, like the stakes are so high in every song, right? It's almost like each song is like a centerpiece to a musical, right? And you said like with the length, they're like mini stories, right, Chris?
Yeah. Right, and to some degree, I mean, even his vocal delivery. If you think about some of the metal singers from the '80s, a lot of them did try to bring some of that like operatic or theatrical stuff to their vocals, and in my mind, I definitely, those are the two things I always thought about, especially from the opening of the record with Bat Out of Hell, is that I thought Bat Out of Hell as a song always had very much of a prog flavor to it, just in terms of like the length and all the things going on. And then I really like theater. I worked in a musical theater school, did a lot of play productions. And then it just like Jerry had said, it's got that vibe of like the opening of all this stuff going on. And it's almost like the overture to like this play that's about to start. And then the record takes you on that journey. It's really cool.
They really swung for the fences on this one.
Yeah,
absolutely.
No, like literally, like even down, like you said, Todd Rundgren's guitar work on "Bat Out of Hell"
was amazing.
Oh,
holy shit! Like, I'm like, I didn't know. I know Todd Rundgren as like a studio rat and a constructor of music, not as like a shredding, destroying guitarist. And on "Bat Out of Hell," the title track, he's just ripping.
Yeah, and it comes in and they're not like solos. They're like, I don't know how to put it. It's like an extension of the soul. Like it's just weird. Which is why I just
it's effect.
It's not like a solo like a regular rock thing. It adds to it, and it like I don't know. It just takes me on like weird.
Yeah, it's almost like different movements in a symphonic piece
Yeah.
where there's vocals, and then all of a sudden there's like Chris said, it's got some like prog pedigree in there. Especially when you get into a song that long, you can't help but start to compare it to prog because it's got to do something different to keep you interested. There's got to be different movements to the song,
right?
to kind of keep you, otherwise it just drones on.
I'm sure most of the big prog bands would disagree with that assessment. Of course, they probably would not take this seriously, and most critics didn't either.
Yeah.
But it seemed to hit just people just seem to relate.
It
to
doesn't
the whole,
feel like that. None of the songs feel as long as they are.
No, they definitely don't.
Yeah, and there is a lot of long songs on this album.
Yeah.
I mean, like you've got a 9:48, an 8:28, and an 8:45, and there's only 7 songs on the album.
Yes,
and the other ones are 4 minutes plus. So these are and that was what Jim Steinman was fighting for was these musical ideas, because he did clash with Rundgren a little bit about the length. Rundgren's like, especially with Bad Out of Hell, he's like, stop. You have to stop writing because we need to finish the song. And Simon's like, well, this is about a crash. This is about I want this to be like the most intense car crash song ever. And he goes, but I haven't written the crash yet. So he kind of wanted to kind of get these musical ideas across, and wasn't constrained. And actually, one of Steinman's actress friends came to him and said, listen, do you have the ability to write a short song? Like she literally said, like a challenge. Yeah. And actually, that's where 2 out of 3 Ain't Bad came from. Is like he's like, okay, I can do something a little bit shorter, and that's where that came from. That kind of power, and that could this be the introduction of the power ballad, Eric? Is this album like the power ballad like blueprint?
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Yeah, absolutely.
Is he the godfather of the power ballad?
I think so. And you see it parodied, all over. I mean, even I remember watching a King of Queens episode where Kevin James is doing like he's trying to write a song for his ex-girlfriend, and it took forever, like to try to get, and he finally did. And at the end of the episode, in the end credits, they played it like a music video from the 80s, and he's wearing like a cap like yours, Dean, with backwards, the sort of, the Kanga, hat, and the but it was like he's wearing like the Meatloaf, because he's heavy, and he's got the Meatloaf style floor,
shirt,
flamboyant shirt on, and and he's like, and he's just rocking it like and sweating. It carries over,
the influence is felt far and wide.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you think about the tracks that Steinman goes on to write later, I mean, you could see the roots of that in this. I mean, he's responsible for like some stuff by Celine Dion and Bonnie Tyler and all these like
total Eclipse of the Heart.
Yeah, you definitely.
Which was supposed to be for Meatloaf, but there was something going on between them. I think there was some issue, but he wrote for Air Supply, Steinman. He writes these big, and that's what it is. I think it's these songs are like melodramatic. I don't mean that in a bad way, but they're just like they're these performance songs. They're songs that are meant to be performed and not just sung.
And that's
what it is.
It's theater. It's definitely theater.
That's what, like, if you watch the videos, I know some of the videos they made them to look like performance, but I'd watch concerts of him.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't know how he's got the energy to do, but he puts everything into it. Like even when he's doing like the duets with whoever at the time the
Carla DeVito,
the female part,
Carla DeVito was live.
It was like they're not just singing back and forth. Like he's getting in her for like they are acting it out like as if no one else is around.
Yeah.
Well, Carla DeVito said that she, when they kiss,
his tongue down her throat,
he actually put his tongue in her mouth, down her throat, so far, like she was like almost, and he's like, this is every night on the tour, like it's the same, and that's crazy.
It's amazing. It's.
I remember my first experience with this. It wasn't the album itself; it was the song.
Mm-hmm.
I think I might have seen it on
Paradise.
On a. It might have been something like Don Kirshner's rock concert or something to that, you know. And that was my first, like, what is this? Like, this guy, like, is big, must weigh like 350 pounds, and he's like sweating profusely. He's holding a handkerchief in his hand, and he's just belting this thing out. And I'm like, what is this? This is like,
he's got the stringy hair,
and it's like, but man, what a beautiful voice though, like coming out of this guy. That's the thing. It's like, holy shit.
Yeah. He had a set of pipes on him. I mean,
absolutely.
Really sing.
Yeah.
I remember when this came out. I remember Paradise by the Dashboard Light in like 78 or 79, kind of hearing 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Hearing these songs again, this was like the album oriented rock era. So that's when the like NEW and those radio stations were in their heyday, and picking up on these extra tracks that were just kind of, like I said, I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. Only hit 39, and Paradise only hit 39. But these are solid rock. Paradise by the Dashboard Light is a certified rock anthem.
Yeah,
it didn't 100%. Get that. It didn't get that way from hitting number 39. It got that way from radio stations picking up on it and playing it and getting it in front of people. So it became
word of mouth.
One of those rock
100% word of mouth record.
Yeah,
and is that a quick question before you go on, Chris? Is everybody here a Yankee fan?
No.
Yes.
Okay. So everybody.
I'm not a Yankee fan.
So for everybody but Chris, but that was a big thing. Like in the New York area, it's like, wait, is that Phil Rizzuto? Like Phil Rizzuto.
When I heard it, I was like, exactly.
He was in the 70s. He's baseball royalty because he was the color commentator for the Yankees. Like it was him, Bill Messer, and I forget what the other guy's name was, but they were the voice of the Yankees. And if you were in the New York area, Phil Rizzuto was part of like your growing up, even if you weren't a Yankee fan. Like you heard him. So all of a sudden, here, like this weird song has all these different movements, and then one of it is kind of like equating this guy trying to get laid with rounding the base, stealing bases, just like like we were kids. I got to first base with this girl, and it's very it's very unique and intriguing.
And he's giving you the play-by-play.
Yeah.
And what a phenomenal. And I always thought it was like almost like a pre-recorded thing that like. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, that's not what the song is definitely about that. So they actually got him to do this. Like they came into the studio to record, like this thing. I'm like, that blew my mind.
He claimed to have no knowledge of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then I read that Meatloaf says that he does.
Yep, he did. Yeah.
And they said that he wasn't as enthusiastic as they wanted. So Meatloaf put pizza boxes on the floor and ran around as if he was running the bases, which is an image in my mind that just blows me. But
I could see it. Yeah,
them using like the terms that Rizzuto used, like you could hear him saying that just in a game, like like exactly what you said, Dean. I was like, is this Phil Rizzuto in the middle of like that? I guess you would say like that song completely put me on a different path, like almost musically, because you think about it, that had to be early 90s. So that's
early 90s 50? For what?
When I first heard that song.
Okay.
So I was going to buy the album like 15 years after, or 14 years after it was released, as if it was like, and I'd never heard it. So, I mean, it has like a staying power of,
I love listening. I like in prep for this, you read, some of the comments people make about, when you're looking stuff up, like interviews and things, like people are commenting in the chats and all that. It's just so many people making that same, I lost my virginity to this song. And I remember I just, effing, my girlfriend, I'm like, this is, for me, it's like, no, this is definitely not what I'd be listening to. If I was getting intimate, like I have other choices in mind, but yeah, it's just, but that's what, that's what appealed people. People kind of just related to that, I just,
they can relate to the relationships. They can relate
to the young innocence, the innocence loss, or the, finding that first experience, that first love, if you will. Yeah.
And Todd Rundgren had a really good quote about it, because he said, everything was written by Jim Steinman, and Rundgren said, I don't think He goes, I firmly believe that none of this ever happened to Jim Steinman, but he goes, I could believe that, but he goes, I can imagine Jim Steinman imagining these things happening. Like no, but via his imagination. Like these are idealized versions of like breakups and of romance and tragedy.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, they're very stylized and very idealized. And so I understand what Rundgren was saying is like, yeah, this stuff doesn't happen this way in real life, but you wish it would. You know, you wish that these kind of, you know, that you would, you know, be battling back and forth with your girlfriend over that kind of stuff, like having those dramatic like duets and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Chris?
yeah.
But what I was going to say is like the one thing about the lyrics that I found is like relatable. Like, you know, there have been people I'm sure that have fooled around in a car and like, you know, and even the song itself, I think I read somewhere that Meatloaf actually related a situation that happened to him as a teenager that Steinman then took and turned it into that song, or like even just some of the more like, you know, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, or you know, I think so some of those things though, I feel like lyrically, like I feel like we've all felt that way at some time, which is why even as crazy and as absurd as some of the lyrics are, I feel like some of it is a little bit relatable and maybe is why people connect with it to some point beyond just the music.
Yeah, I think because it's so big, because it's so and it's performed so broadly, that I think it hits a wide swath of people, right? I think you're hitting a lot of people with it because it's got the rock and roll underpinnings, you know, it's got great production, and then it's got these big, you know, Meatloaf's like soaring vocals, like 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Oddly enough, in when they released it in Japan, they couldn't release it with the title 2 out of 3 ain't bad. They had to translate it to 66% is good enough. That's it. I'm being serious.
Romantic.
I'm being serious. That is how they had it. That's how they released it in Japan.
That's precise.
66% is good enough.
But I could.
Sounds like my work. Sounds like my work ethic.
Going back to like what you guys were saying about it being relatable, I don't think I could ever pull off telling somebody, hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
But at the same time, I'm sure there have been people that have felt that way. Like, you know,
I could see feeling it.
Yeah, but not actually saying it. No
like
way.
That song, like I was listening to it on the way home, and I'm like, this is freaking cold, man.
Yeah.
To be like, you're not finding. One of my favorite lines is the Coupe de Ville at the bottom of a cracker.
Yeah.
I'm like, I wish I had the balls to say this to someone in my life.
It's almost self-deprecating too. He goes because he's kind of saying you're not gonna. I'm not the pot of gold you're looking for. I want you, I need you, but I'm never gonna love you. Like this is just gonna be like a friends with benefits type thing. He was like the first, you know, and it's very It's when you sit and listen to these lyrics, even "Paradise by the Dashboard Light," that whole ending part, right? I
so great.
End of time. It goes, now I'm praying for the end I could end my time with you. So really, like, you know, it's really very clever with in its storytelling, right? It really kind of resolves, especially a song like that with all these different pieces to it. And at the end, in the beginning, they're kind of young and they're duetting, and then at the end, they're both like, you know, I'm done.
Well, I think we've all seen that firsthand. I mean, going to high school, it speaks to youth. 100%. And you know, we're all dreamers when we're young, and some people are more, you know, they're more sort of out there with it, or other people are just thinking about it or more introverted about it or something. But it's like, but we were all dramatic about it, right? I mean, your first love, your breakup, or whatever. I mean, the notes and the, you know, I mean, it definitely. There's nothing political about this record. There's nothing. It's not speaking to a generation and talking at you as like you're. No, it's just it's
recounting the time.
Recounting the time, and when you go back and listen to it, it really takes you back.
Yeah, because
when I got out of it, you know,
when I first heard it, I was in that age. It was like just after maybe just senior year of high school. So I related that part. Listening to it now, I'm like, I kind of miss that part of my life. It was so much easier and so much simpler.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, you can kind of go back. We have to give some props to Ellen Foley.
Oh yeah,
she is the kind of pillar that Meatloaf is able to lean up against, in her backing vocals too. She's on this out. She's throughout this album. Everybody, you know, the mistake she made. She didn't want to be in the video for "Paradise by the Dashboard Light." She wasn't interested in doing it. So they got a singer named Carla DeVito, who then would go out on tour. But in the music video, Carla DeVito is lip syncing Ellen Foley's vocals. So everyone thinks it's Carla DeVito, but it's actually, and she's married to Robbie Benson, by the way, who's the voice of the Beast and Beauty and the Beast. So everyone thinks it's Carla DeVito, but it's Ellen Foley is the one that is throughout this album kind of really also kind of helping to craft this sound with her backing vocals and with that sassy, like, you know, she really needed to be able to match Meatloaf's intensity with her own not the same way, but with like a sassiness almost. You know,
she hails from comedy.
Yeah.
You know,
theater.
She did in Night Court. She was on the show Night Court
for a time. Really?
Oh yeah, the original.
The second season.
Wasn't she the original prosecutor? Right? She was
she was before Marky Post.
Holy crap!
Yep.
Yeah. I did not know that she was involved with Meatloaf. They did some touring together with National Lampoon.
Yeah.
So there was so that's the connection right there. Is the comedic aspect of her doing that kind of stuff, and then her coming onto this, and you know, how do you propose this to somebody? You know, like, hey, we need you to do this. You know, that comes from them touring together and then working together, and it's but it's really cool that there's those sort of little bits of like comedic elements to it in a sense, because that's like Dean would pointed out, that sassiness comes through, and it's definitely there. So, you know, you definitely, you know, but Carla DeVito might have brought something different to the live show, the live performance,
more sensuality,
a little more rock and roll.
Yeah, that too. Let's talk a little bit about the track. You took the words right out of my mouth, because that's where the Phil Spector. If anybody's wondering, like, what is the Phil Spector sound? Because we've mentioned Phil Spector on many different episodes, and he seems to keep coming up as much of a dirtbag and a deplorable human being he is. Like, honestly, he really is. But during the '60s, he created a sound that is often imitated, many times duplicated, rarely eclipsed, except for by Brian Wilson, of course. But if you listen to, you took the words right out of my mouth, and you're wondering, what is this Phil Spector sound? It's that. First of all, anytime you hear a song that has a breakdown that goes dun 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 ba, that's Phil Spector. That's Be My Baby. That's the Ronettes. It's everywhere. Even as recent as Eric and I, we did the Lord Huron album, Long Lost. It's in there. They're even calling back to Phil Spector. So it's a certain kind of sound, and it's called the Wall of Sound. And I never noticed it until I read about, like, the Phil Spector-ish, and I went back and listened. I'm like, oh my God, it's like staring me right in the face. Like, how did I not pick up on that? And it's just like that lush for that song. So I'm glad that Todd Rundgren was able to pick and choose different influences and put them where they needed to be. Like,
and to get
like
that drum sound.
Like a song like Heaven. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And a song like Heaven Can Wait would not benefit from that. You know, that's like the solo song of like the main character in the musical with just a lonely piano, you know,
and just a spotlight on them.
Exactly. So I like that the influences were used sparingly and in the right way, and not too much, because you could almost eclipse Meatloaf. And the whole point is this guy's voice is putting the right instrumentation or arrangements around it when it's appropriate. And, you know, because he can match it. He can go toe to toe with a big production at that time, at least, before his voice started going.
And then the other thing about it that I read today that I never really noticed before, and I started to think about, they said something I read said that the chords that song are built around are the same chords as Bob O'Reilly underneath, and then they put everything else on top. So then I had to like sit there in my head and listen to the chord changes. I'm like, because I couldn't hear it. I'm like, how is that even possible? But apparently was one of the influences as well.
Yeah, and also the Eagles make an influence on 2 Out of 3 Ain't Bad. Yep. Todd Rundgren was like, the Eagles were very big at the time. So we kind of took some of the Eagles' influence and sprinkled it in 2 Out of 3 Ain't Bad. So if you kind of listen to it, and I don't know if that's the Mandela effect, if they're telling us to listen to something and then we're finding it because they're telling us that's what it should be. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know if I'm too easily swayed by reading that
Nah.
and then
That I didn't
listening
hear
to
at
it and then
all.
saying, okay, that's what it is.
I mean,
I think with that, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna
I
say,
hear
I
it in
heard,
like I hear it in the bass line for 2 out of
right.
3 Ain't Bad. It's very Eagles-ish
But
to me.
I watched that documentary that they told about the album, and when Rundgren said that, I was like, that was the first thought in my mind. I was like, I don't hear that at all. Even now,
No.
after I've heard him say it, I can't picture that.
I think it might have been referring to that. I think there's some comments made by the harmonies could be,
Yeah,
just
the
sort of like
piano,
those.
and the
There's a
piano's
sort of a
very
lushness.
Desperado.
There's a definite lushness to harmonic voices when they come together like that in such a big production. But like, yeah, that's a great example. Desperado
Yeah,
and
the piano, it's got
yeah,
that lonely tinkling piano,
yeah,
and 2 out of 3 Ain't Bad has that as well. So, you know, it is exactly like the Eagles, no, because it's
wow.
not a ripoff. But I love reading that these artists are being influenced by contemporaries of the time and saying, "Wow, I kind of dig that," or let me use it as the inspiration for. I was inspired by that to kind of
Inspiration and
run it.
influence are two different.
Yeah,
So you're not.
let me
Yeah,
run it through my filters, and
right.
then what comes out on the back end. So running it through Todd Rundgren's crazy brain, it comes out as something else, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
which was very interesting. So let's see. So, like Eric said, some of the E Street Band helps out. You got Max Weinberg and Roy Battan out there. You also have was it Johnny Winter or Edgar Winter?
Edgar plays
Edgar Winter.
saxophone. Yeah.
Phone.
Edgar
Yeah.
Winter playing saxophone. I
Yeah.
mean, like what?
Which is another
Like, how did they
Other
land?
strange
thing.
instrument.
You got to think, how did they land him? Like, they couldn't get a record deal, but they get Edgar Winter on the record. Like, and he was pretty big in the mid-70s. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah,
That had to,
absolutely.
yeah, that had to be a Todd Rundgren
Musicians are
connection.
different than
Another
record
great.
I
people.
guess so, man.
Yeah.
If you ever seen that guy live, he's crazy. That guy, Edgar Winter. I saw him. I got to see him once, and Johnny came out and
Oh
they
man.
did a couple of songs together.
Really?
That was a total surprise, by the way. But yeah, that was a monster of a show. I forget
It was a
when.
monster of a show because they do Frankenstein. Nice. I see what you
That
I see
wasn't
what
on
you did
purpose.
there.
Ripping it in 2024.
No, but I'm not surprised that, but I find that a lot of keyboard players do tend to like, there's a lot of keyboard players who play flute, that play horns as well.
Yeah, he plays sax on this.
It's odd. It's odd to me that there you go from something so rhythmic, as a keyboard, and then you take on
A woodwind or
another
a
instrument like a
brass
wood.
instrument. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, and do it really well. By the way, it's not just you're just winging it. You're doing it as good, and maybe better than you're doing what you're doing on the keyboard. So it's yeah. So
Yeah, and he's on
he would do stuff, yeah.
and he's on 3 songs on the album. So it's not
Yeah,
like
yeah.
these are guys that are throughout the whole process. So it's not like, oh, Edgar Winter's on one song and Max Weinberg. These guys, it's almost kind of and Rundgren is on throughout too. So it's almost like these are the kind of musicians that were there for all the sessions that kind of
Yeah.
put this whole thing together,
And then you've
I
got
figure it
Utopia.
must have felt like you were part of something.
Yeah.
Like just be like in a musician world.
Yeah.
Like you're not just background. Like everyone's getting a chance to shine. And it's like it's just like, again, it's just a production that it's got to be fun for them to be part of it.
I hope
And
so.
then Rundgren brought in his whole band Utopia. Every member of Utopia is on the record too, and they're like completely different and like they don't sound anything like what the Bat Out of Hell record sounds like, which is just speaks to the caliber of musicians that they all are.
And that's when you start to take it seriously. That's when like if you're into that, if you choose to like listen to the album, and like Dean we're always talking about who plays on the record and why and that kind of thing. That's part of the musical experience for us.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, and so certain things that come off or not perhaps maybe critically acclaimed or even people don't like. I mean, but you respect it because of the people playing on it, and it's just for that alone. I could give this album big props for that. So it may not be something that I necessarily relate to myself, but as a piece, as a concept, there are other things out there that I think are but just the performances and the musicianship on this record is just outstanding. So
Yeah,
it's
especially for
really,
the time it came out. I mean, it
and
was
that's Todd Rundgren right there. It's testament
yeah.
to him and his production, sense. So
Yeah, and he clashed with Steinman about a lot. Steinman wanted to do orchestral stuff, male choirs of boys, and Rundgren was like, no, probably because Rundgren was
which
maybe because he was footing the bill. He's like, I ain't paying for this because I don't know if I'm going to get my money back.
would not have been a bad thing, given the
Yeah,
material. That's not necessarily a bad idea,
But you're
but
not
right.
getting a radio hit out of any of that. The fact that what
yeah,
they got was a radio hit, and I would imagine, you guys talking about behind the scene. I just like the sound of it all. I do love, like, I for some reason I love voices, and like you've said, like Meatloaf, like blows me out of the water, but especially when you see what he looks like. I
yeah,
hate to harp on that, but like it just
Yeah.
so, but you're not getting, Billy Joel with the 3 minutes type of song that he sang about in whatever that song was, and I guess you're just not that they were two different ideas thinking of I want to have a chorus
yeah.
of and
Mhm.
another one's thinking of do we need a 10-minute song again? And it's like,
Exactly. That was the struggle.
but
That's
it
that's
works.
artist versus producer, Jerry. You make a good
Yeah.
point of the Jim Steinman had these things in his head, and at the time in that point in the 70s, there was these lush productions. There were these big productions. I mean, this was the glory days for that kind of stuff where you could get
Mhm.
away with it.
Mhm.
But I think Rundgren might have been trying to be more practical and saying, yeah, like A, do we really need it? B, it's probably going to cost money. C, is it going to
Mhm.
give us any type of a hit? Or is this going to be end up being just some weird project? So you know
Yeah.
what? It might have in this case it might have been good, Chris. Where you think that maybe have some guardrails on it. What do you think?
Well, to me, like that's one of the things I like about it is that it's still as theatrical as it is, as grand as it is, and as big as it is. At the end of the day, it's still just straight up rock and roll. There's still a rawness
Yeah,
to it,
Mhm.
and it can
Yeah.
be pulled off live. And like I think if you start to pile things on, it starts to take away from the focus of the song or the vocal and those things kind of because as you start to pile things on, things start to be kind of overcrowded and it just gets to be too much. And
sure.
to me, I think that's
Mhm.
what's good about it. And that's why you need a producer. You need a producer to say, wait a minute, man, I think you need to pull back because you need somebody to tell you it's good the way it is. Like there has to be that person to finally
Yeah.
say, you have to stop because we've got what we need. This is what you want it to be.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and that could have been his Broadway sensibilities too, of having these grand arrangements and orchestral, interludes or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, Chris, you make a really good point. Is that it's important for that bass, and probably what hit Jerry is that bass has got to be rock and roll,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
It's got to be something that kind of moves you and grooves you. Because if you're going to be in it for 8 minutes, if you're going to be in it for 9 minutes, it can't be freeform jazz, just kind of going off into, that is a different segment of rock and roll. And that's not what this is trying to be. This is
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
be theatrical, like rock and roll with a
Mhm.
theatrical spin and a theatrical bend to it,
Mhm.
I mean,
which is something different than Prague.
and it
Yeah.
speaks absolutely. And it does speak to the fact that like they were able to, when they, instead of doing demos, they would perform this for record company executives. And the fact that they were able to just do it with a piano and a vocal speaks to the fact that these songs can stand on their own without all of that window dressing to go around
Sure.
it. So
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's very, and this was kind of kind of like lightning in a bottle because,
Yes.
Meatloaf would have a couple of albums, in the 80s, he would kind of, he would hit a dry spell. It wasn't until he put out Bad Out of Hell 2 that he had I Would Do Anything for Love, but I Won't Do That, which kind of, kind of relaunched him. So it
Mhm.
seems, he was kind of toiling. He was doing, he was acting, of course. He was in Fight Club. He was Robert Paulson. From what I read, he actually helped David Fincher edit Fight Club. He was like in the editing room giving him advice and helping him.
I didn't know that.
From what I read, yeah, I'm like, okay,
Wow.
Meatloaf's got he's got some multi talents there, just besides the big man boobs that he has in Fight Club. in Fight Club. So yeah, I mean, he kind of had that wane in the '80s where people had moved on from this kind of music. You know, the '80s did not have the theatrics. The '80s was the Hairspray and the DX7s, and this kind of stuff was aged out, I think, pretty quickly. But it looks like in the '90s it was able to kind of with the advent of like the Celine Dion's and those type of singers, that Meatloaf was able to sneak back in again and kind of recapture some of the magic for Bad Out of Hell 2. And then, yeah, like I said, he did Bad Out of Hell 3, and there were lawsuits with him and Steinman. Steinman wanted to copyright the name Bad Out of Hell, which I'm not sure he probably could have anyway, because that was kind of a saying before him.
Yeah.
But and then Meatloaf had a stroke, and he had some collapse on stage, and the doctor's like, your shows can't be more than an hour and 45 minutes from now on, because you're just too, like, because he would need oxygen after the shows. I remember seeing a documentary, like, it was relatively recent, but he would do the show and have to go back and get an oxygen mask because the guy leaves it all out there, regardless of how of what his voice sounded like later in life, which is a whole other thing. He still gave it. Every performance was like his last show.
He would pass out,
and that's what theatrical actors do. That's what Broadway actors do. Is they bring it every night. You can't be cranky and be like Kurt Cobain and throw the guitar down and say I'm leaving. Like you have to be a professional, and that's what Meatloaf's pedigree is. So he kind of comes from that. You leave it all out there, and sometimes to his detriment. But he, you got to credit the guy.
But that's what like draws you to it.
Yeah.
Like that's seriously, like when I would see things of him live, I was amazed. Like there was one album he had, which I didn't realize was a very limited edition type of. It was a live album, and it was one of my favorite. In all my moves, it got lost somewhere, but it was one of my favorite albums because, like what you said, Dean, he's putting it all. Like he's not just singing the songs. Like to him, he's putting on a play every freaking night.
Yeah.
And it's just it's amazing. And you get caught up in it. Even if you're not like really feeling it at first, you get caught up in just what he's given to you, like his emotion. Like he's really trying to score with the woman in Paradise, like every time he does.
You believe it. You absolutely.
You absolutely.
He makes you believe it.
It's acting as much as it is singing.
Exactly, which
Absolutely.
you don't really see. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I have a question. If anybody wants to tackle it, is Bad Out of Hell a concept album without a concept? It feels like it should. It feels like these are all about something. Like it feels like because it has that theatrical spin to it, that there should be a defined, like there should be a defined beginning, end, and middle. And it feels like these things are all part of something, but I can't figure out.
Thematically, I think it's
theme to it.
Yeah, it speaks to youth and innocence.
I don't think it's a concept.
There's no like set. It's not like a rock opera per se where there are characters.
But it almost is, right?
Yeah. In sound and form, sure. But like conceptually or lyrically, there's no set story per se. It's just thematically, it's all the same.
Yeah, it's all about the emotion of youth is what I was trying to say.
I think you could have easily fixed that by putting like a guy's name in each song, like the same guy's name, and then it would have been a concept album. I could have fixed it.
Yeah.
Put a guy's name in each song that's the same name and it's the same guy.
It begins as a because of the Peter Pan Neverland idea. But I don't think that carries through. I think that I think Chris and Eric said, there's a theme of youth. It travels through Bad Out of Hell 2, where a lot of it is youth, and it's things that you can relate to when you're that age.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's an underlying concept album, which I was thinking of that today when I was listening to it.
And then the other thing
just doesn't. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jerry.
Sorry. No, I'm done.
To me, the thing that I always thought about was like, I know the 70s, there was a big, kind of renaissance and revival about things from the early 60s and the 50s with American Graffiti coming out and stuff. And it doesn't necessarily sound of its time musically. To me, I always thought of it as him like kind of tributing the music of his youth. and like, thinking about music from the past. And so like there's that,
Mhm.
to me, that flavor of like music that was like maybe 15 or 20 years older than the record itself. So that, and I know that's not necessarily a concept, but to me that was also part of the theme of the record to some degree. I mean,
Yeah. Actually, Chris Steinman himself actually said, he goes, you could put this album out in any decade or era. He goes, no matter when this album would have been put out, it would not sound like when it was from.
Right.
Like, because that was the thing that was mystifying, I guess, the record executives. Like, this doesn't sound like anything that we're used to at the time. And so timeless, I think Steinman is saying it's timeless, but in a weird way that it doesn't really fit anywhere. It's not timeless because it's universal. He goes, it's timeless because it's so quirky that it doesn't fit in 77. It wouldn't fit in 87. It wouldn't fit in 67 or 07,
But at the same
But it
time,
reminds you of different times.
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at the
It
same,
brings it all together.
and it sells like 200,000 copies a year. I mean, it's kind of one of those records that like,
which is crazy.
and it's one of those records I feel like everybody kind of even if you didn't hit upon it as a kid, like I hit upon it as a kid because my dad had it, and I remember I remember my old man having it in his tape drawer and being drawn in by the cover and listening to it as a younger person. But I also know a lot of my friends hit on it in college, when I was in college in the late 90s and early 2000s. So that's 20 years after the record came out, and people were still connecting with it and still finding it as they were discovering what they were into musically.
Yeah, I think it's rock and roll 101. I think if you Google classic rock albums from the 70s, you're gonna get this album cover is gonna be there. Which leads me to the question, and all of you can take a swing at it. Is Paradise by the Dashboard Light, is it in the pantheon of greatest rock anthems of all times, or is it the greatest duet of all time?
I think I made that point on our duet episode.
Yeah, that's right.
That was my number one pick. And I absolutely agree. That's
Can
it's
it be
the first song I thought of. It could. Well, yeah, sure. I think
I feel like that's a duet to me.
It's a duet.
It's a duet of them singing to each other, of a very fancy conversation that lots of 16, 17-year-old kids are trying to have at that time. And that's how I see it. Though I could see, I mean, again, that was what opened me to this album. It wasn't the duet part of it. It was the sound of it. It was especially the end of it when they just explode in the "now I'm praying for the end of time." I think that's what caught me because it all builds up. Like when you think of songs out of that, like I think of like Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
I'm almost waiting for the explosion at the end of it. I love the whole song, but I'm waiting for it. But like Paradise, I can listen to the whole song of Paradise because you're like going through it. But it was that end of it where they are just singing to each other like we're tired of each other. So I get a duet from that as opposed to like an anthem-y type of feel.
All right. Chris?
Like to me, I would say the same thing. I would say it's probably one of the great duets, but I do feel like there is that anthemic element of it too. Like, it's just because it's part of like it's part of the lexicon at this point. Like, even people who don't listen to this kind of music know this song. I mean, and my both of my kids know this song, and I don't necessarily know that and I don't necessarily know, and I don't necessarily think it's because I've played it for them. So like, it's just to me, that is what makes it an anthem. It's just like, it's one of those things that we all know. It's part of Americana at this point.
It's one of those songs that when it comes on in a bar, the guys can sing part of it, and then the girls will be like all sassy and in their boyfriend's face pointing at them, like kind of taking them to task, like it's their opportunity to air their grievances via song.
Oh, karaoke nights. I mean, every night was this song. It was played at least once, sometimes 3 times. You'd hear it in the same night. But
I'd be like, give it a rest.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that they don't edit it in any way, shape, or form. So you're getting the full 9, 8, and 9 minutes, and you're just like waiting for your turn, and you're like, it's like
take out of it. There's nothing to take out of it.
And how do you follow that up? How do you go up there and follow? Nobody could. So it's just an amazing. And again, like Chris pointed out, you don't have to even like the song or even, but to acknowledge its presence and its greatness, and it just
Is it? Let me ask another question. Just kind of came to me, and this might be a bold statement, but is it as an epic creation in its own world? Is it as epic as something like Stairway to Heaven is, or Bohemian Rhapsody is to Queen? Is this as epic? Like, it doesn't have that type of pedigree where it's this, like Jerry, because Jerry made a good point about Bohemian Rhapsody, and this song kind of builds to that too, and it's got all the movements. Stairway to Heaven is the same thing. It's got all these different movements and builds to a crescendo. Can this swing in that same batting cage as those type of songs when it's put in that type of perspective, or is this overblown?
It's a different subject matter, which I think changes the energy of the song.
It does.
Because you listen to Bohemian Rhapsody, listen to Stairway to Heaven, like you're getting a different feel. You listen to Paradise, and right away you're thinking, I hope this guy gets laid. I want to. So it's like that changes it. But I do think for Meatloaf, it is in that same route. Like you do get that same, at least I do. I get that same feel. Like this is his. We're going for it for 9 minutes, and it's going to explode at the end, and it's just going to be fun. And yeah, I get that same thing from Stairway to Heaven and also Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah, Baba O'Reilly. I mean, I think a lot of these songs have the same type of structure to them. Yeah, they're all vastly different, but they all kind of have a build-up, whereas Paradise is actually the build-up of the story. With the other songs, it's kind of more the build-up of the musicianship and kind of all the different other parts. But this is more, maybe because it's so theatrical, that you kind of remove it from it, because you're not concentrating on the musicality of this song, because it's not really there's not anything big musically going on. It's kind of that boogie woogie piano kind of backing them up. It's the epicness of the relationship, like Jerry said. It's the epicness of the stakes are so high of these young people, of these young people sorting through this relationship, or the guy trying to get to as many bases as he can. But I think
it stands as it's theater. You definitely see this like in a theater. Going to see like a play or even or in concert. It works in both a stadium or an intimate, like sort of like off Broadway thing kind of thing, and it just. You immediately go there because it has that sort of the act where it's not like a grandiose operatic thing like Supper's Ready for Genesis. It's like 25 minutes and it's like the apocalypse in 9/8 and all that kind of thing. This is like very relatable. It's very sort of. I think another somebody brought up Billy Joel. I think Jerry brought up Billy Joel, and I think a song that might kind of in the same vein is Scenes from an Italian Restaurant. I mean, that to me is kind of the same in that kind of same.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Vein there, so like it builds to something, and it's like, it's telling a story about a couple, and
I guess the question is, would these okay, so let's take that Scenes from an Italian Restaurant, Paradise by the Dashboard Light, Baba O'Reilly, Bohemian Rhapsody, and Stairway to Heaven. Would all of those fit on a playlist? If someone played those for you, would you get the theme of what they were playing you? If those songs were on a playlist, besides them being long,
I know where Dean's going with it. Absolutely. I think
would they fit is the question.
I think they would, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the same either. Like when I think of
no. They wouldn't have to be, but the structure of the song, the sort of the changes, multiple changes within the song, that kind of building up to something bigger and grand,
But the emotions would be different.
Yeah. And I think what makes a song like Barbara O'Reilly or Stairway to Heaven so grand is to me, it's more of the playing, like Keith Moon's drums or Jimmy Page's guitar, whereas
different reasons.
With Paradise, to me, what really makes it such an epic and build-up song is the performance, because like you said, it's just like a 50s rock and roll type of vibe, but it's that performance that really blows you away every time as you go through all the different movements.
And throwing Rizzuto in there is just
of course,
like everyone's waiting for that.
No, none of the other songs can claim they have the scooter, and none of them have the scooter.
Holy cow!
Holy cow! He stole a base. He's almost daring him to pick him off. Holy cow, I think he's going to make it. Then it's like, stop.
And there, ladies and gentlemen, is the first impression of the year.
So yes.
Kudos to you, Dean. Yes. There it is. It has to be. It has to be.
Who would have thought in all movies and music that we do that it would be fucking Phil Rizzuto that would be the first impression of the year. He gets the Golden Glove.
There you go.
So as we wrap up, I think, this is one of those albums, like, I think we've all kind of mentioned it. It's kind of a feeling album. Like, you're not listening to it, even though it's got the technical prowess, because you got Todd Rundgren behind the controls and playing instruments. So it's got that, but we're not listening to it for that. That helps set the stage. That's like the base of the pyramid. I think what you're going to go to this album for is Meatloaf. I mean, the guy he's got the goods. Like, that's the thing is, it's dramatic. It's epic. It's big sounding. It's also tender sounding. Like, like I said, what the hell is the name of the song again?
Heaven Can Wait, or 2 out of 3.
Yeah, Heaven Can Wait. So it's got a little bit of everything on there. And like I said, you could almost take that journey if you closed your eyes and listened to it one sitting, that this is almost like Jerry said, you can imagine this being a Broadway show. It was, but when it was made, it wasn't conceived that way. And this is another rock and roll 101. I mean, this is one of the albums of the 70s that was like a pillar. Like Chris said, it's still selling 200,000 a year. That's an evergreen. That's not even an evergreen. That's a whole forest of trees. like that, like something that sells that much. That's not the Beatles or not Led Zeppelin. Yeah. That is by a guy that largely is known for one album.
I was going to say this is his one.
Yeah, keep that in mind. It's not like, it's Led Zeppelin, in which I'm going to get the most popular Led Zeppelin album. For the most part, Bat Out of Hell is like a one and done. Because like I said, he went through the 80s with not a lot going on and then kind of resurfaced. But this one, at that time in rock and roll, I remember it was like kind of like you had Foreigner, you had Styx, you had all, and Meatloaf was it. Like you had this was like the major leagues of rock and roll in the 70s. Of all these, Heart was in there. All these artists were just in there kind of like pounding away at things and just putting out their best stuff. And Eagles, I mean, it's such a great time to be alive, for that music to be out when you're aware of it. And that's what I remember. I remember when this came out, and I remember it playing and blasting. And it was just one of those special ones, like Eric said, that make up the patchwork of our lives, of our musical lives, and it occupies a special space. And hopefully if you've listened to the album, that we've done it justice, and you feel the same way. If you haven't listened to it yet, it's on the streaming, it's on all the streaming services. So you can absolutely check it out. It sounds great. So, but if you're into the musical part, you're going to hear some great arrangements. There's a lot of ear candy to dig into. But on top of that is Mr. Marvin Lee Aday, also known as Meatloaf, who kind of really stands on the shoulders of Jim Steinman. They were equal partners. They were collaborators in that aspect. Even though Meatloaf didn't write the stuff, he was a part of that process, a part of that collaboration of them two as a pair, presenting this material. That Meatloaf is the voice for Jim Steinman, because Jim Steinman, he does the weird thing in the beginning, would you give your jaw?
Yeah.
Well, he's that dramatic
on a hot summer night.
Yeah, I bet you say that to all the boys. I'm like, but you know what? It needs to be. That's almost like a palate cleanser, because Bat Out of Hell is so long that you almost need something that corny to kind of clear the plate, and then you kind of get onto the rest of the album.
Apparently, the guy that signed him, that's one of the guy that signed them. That little intro is apparently what sold him on the record. He's like, okay, like
really?
that from what I was reading, yeah, that's something that random and silly, but yeah.
For me, that's where the sort of the Rocky Horror vibe comes in.
Yeah,
sort of like that. So when you first hear it, you're like, oh, that's it. For me, it immediately took me there. But
a little bit of camp. It's got a little bit.
It did always stick out to me why it said whatever songs by Jim Steinman. Like, I didn't learn about that till much later. Like, I was always like, because I know there's always a writer. Like, I'll go back to like Iron Maiden. Most of the songs are written by Steve Harris. Like, there's always one like main writer, and I was like, why does this guy like? That's another thing that made it seem like more than just an album. Was there's got to be a reason why this guy's name is
Yeah.
written there as the writer. It wasn't until much later that I realized that they were like partners.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know.
Did you find that disappointing though when you found out it wasn't Meatloaf himself that wrote the
Not at
song?
all. No,
Or
because I'm used to like there being a main writer, and
Yeah.
typically it's the lead singer that is the face or like the energy of a band,
yeah,
and
the
I'm used
entertainer,
to that, and it's like that's just kind of the world. But to know that they were partners, it actually kind of made it a little different. Even though I know they had their issues, I was like, that's pretty cool that this is coming from one man. I don't know. It was a different thing for me to
Well, I think it's one thing to write a song, but to write a song for that partner because you know that
Yes.
they're going to deliver.
Yeah.
It's like
That's
Elton
another
John and what was the
Bernie
guy's
Taupin.
name?
Bernie
Bernie Taupin.
Yep.
Townsend
Exactly.
and Daltrey and
It- It's different than like like when you take the boy bands and you have like the guy that's just like throwing out all the different songs for like it is a different energy, and that's why it wasn't like I actually I liked it because they were working together. It was like it was a collaboration. So
yeah. All right. I think that's a great place to leave it. Chris, you have any closing thoughts?
The one thing I wanted to add to is if anybody can, I mean, you can find them if you go onto YouTube. As great as the record is, too, watching some of those live performances from the '70s, so you can see what we're talking about. He's got he's got a cooking band behind him. He's got Bruce and Bob Kulick, who are both associated with the band Kiss, and he's Carla DeVito. If you can find them on YouTube, like to just get that extra added vibe of what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Check out those performances.
Yeah, and like I said, it's available on streaming. It's not available at Caldor anymore, Jerry, so you can't get this at Caldor, unfortunately. If anybody's watching on YouTube, you're seeing the Caldor Section G, which is I think $7.99. Remember, you used to have to look at the letter to see what the price was because they never put the prices. But it is available on all streaming platforms, so you can go check that out. So that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Again, if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe. If you're finishing up on Spotify or any of your podcasting platforms, go ahead and give us a rating, a review, or follow. And this way you get notified when there's new episodes that come out. And hopefully you'll see more of our smiling faces if you're watching us on YouTube. So, Christopher Clark, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for having me again.
For appearance number 3. He's got the hat trick in right now. So
yes, I do.
Yes.
We don't have robes for 5-timers, though. I just got to let you know.
Okay.
Jerry Sullivan, of course, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Always a lot of fun.
Thank you very much.
It's a great time. And again, thank you to everybody that's checking us out. If you're not doing anything and you're on social media, we've also got a great group on Facebook. Almost 500 members. We're one away from 500. So you could be the 500th member if you get there quick enough. But go ahead and find us on Facebook at 3324 Podcast. A great group. Christopher posts there quite often. A lot of great stuff. A lot of great community members that really enhance what we hope the podcast experience is. You can get that on social media as well as an adjunct. So for Jerry, for Chris, and for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will see you on the flip side.